Maybe we'll keep that in.
Bonus points if you know what that's from.
um, okay, so first we'll start off by reaching out. So we're trying to grow. Appreciate any follows, subscriptions, likes that come in. We focus on a charity aspect to this channel and the videos that are created. And we'll hear more about that in a minute. But, the follows, the likes, the shares, whatever. Growing with that is just a way to help get the word out to more people and help bring in some more money for the different causes that we support. So that's the first thing. Second, I want to mention, speaking of likes and subscribes, this will be the conversation we have for about an hour on Twitch Live here, and then afterwards I will be uploading the video as a YouTube video of the conversation, and so that'll be available to watch at your leisure. Cool. So then that brings me to the most important part of the intro announcements or pre-conversation stuff, which is we support charities for every single conversation that we have. And so today I asked Khory to if he had a specific charity he wanted to support. And so he chose the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. There is a link in chat. You can use the command that's in the title. It'll link you to a place where you can donate towards that fund to help out the people in need over there. So that's the charity we'll be supporting for this, and that'll be in the description of the YouTube video as well. So I guess without further ado, let's introduce you, Khory. Tell me a little bit about who you are, or not me, I guess, but the people.
Yeah. Hey, man. It's so good to see you. I'm Khory, which you know. I do stuff. I'm a sound designer. That's super fun. Originally from Michigan, a little south of Detroit, Michigan, and I'm here living in good old San Francisco, California out in the Bay for like, what is it now? 7 years? 7-ish years? I feel like I'm getting old. Can't even remember.
Bay.
Yeah. In the San Francisco for like 3, almost 4. Yeah. Right when we moved, right when we were done, right when you moved, I moved, basically.
Yep.
I was like, I can't do it here anymore without Josh. I need to go. Change my life, change my spot, that whole thing.
I know. I have such a pull, such an essence. You couldn't even live in the same city anymore.
It was like an orbit, right, around, and then you left, and I just got shot into space.
Yeah. I'm so sorry, man. So sorry.
San Francisco. No, good, man, good. I do miss that swimming pool.
Yep. Yep.
That was nice.
Cool. Yeah, so I think we talked about a couple things, and we'll kind of see where the conversation goes. But where I think we're going to focus today is just about what you do in sound design, what that kind of entails, kind of just giving some idea to that process and some of the hidden things that I think a lot of us don't really realize is going on. Like there's so much to the process of, like, if you watch a movie, it's not like you're sitting in a room and the people are talking. There's a whole ton of stuff happening, right? Similar with a game. In a lot of ways, people think of a game as the gameplay, but there is such an important atmospheric or environmental piece that, like, sound and like background art and things like that play into whether or not the game is very like drawing and that kind of thing.
Right. It's a really, really interesting, to say the least. Like basically almost really, I mean, any job in post-production is interesting. Everything that's added after the point of like recording whatever is going on.
Yeah.
And then you go into the gaming world, and it's a whole different thing.
Mm-hmm.
For sound specifically, I mean, like, I got into it because as a kid, I kind of love games like a lot of people do,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of realized at some point, you know, whether it was because like I grew up like I got thrown in the piano when I was 8, or because I just was like a weird kid, I would like copy noises with my mouth that I heard, like random stuff like that. Like I just was
Mm-hmm.
like a really weird like audio kid, and so at one point realized like, hey, like there's sounds in these games, there's music in these games that like make me feel stuff. I like feeling stuff. Like maybe maybe I can do that for other people, and that kind of just started the whole thing. Um, Getting into the like skip decades later almost.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's such an interesting art form, especially when you're making it for other people in a way. Like it's both the collaborative aspects, so making it with people, making it like a something that's like greater than the sum of its parts, like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you need the people who shot it, you need the director, you need the actors in it. If this is a movie, if it's not, you need animators, you need lighting artists, you need all this stuff. You need an insane amount of programmers, like all that stuff. And then us doing sound, like that part is really kind of beautiful in a way. Um, so many different disciplines who knows pretty much nothing about the other discipline, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of all work together to make this thing, which is cool. Um, Sound specifically, though, at the end of the day, it's kind of funny because if you do your job right, nobody pays attention to it. It's like like for the
Yeah.
most part, especially for movies,
Mm-hmm.
you just kind of watch it and you just kind of enjoy the experience as a holistic thing, as opposed to like, of course, there's things like the sonic imploder from Star Wars, like Jango Fett's thing, or like certain sounds that we know that people are like, that sound is really cool, but like on the whole, as you said, like people talking, people walking, just general ambience in the world, like that could have been recorded on set, or that could be all invented after the fact, like stripped to silence and then built back up from nothing, um, which is fascinating. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
fascinating to have learned that that's what people do and then to have done it. Um, it's a wild ride for sure. Both creative and kind of like, I don't know what the other word I guess would be, but again, it's creative. Some puzzle solving, it's kind of fun. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Um,
Yeah.
Everyone should pay more attention to the sounds of the things that you like, and see what you can pick up.
What in your experience, what would you say like is your, depending on I guess the situation, I suppose, building from a silence up to a full sort of uh, ambiance and filling in all the gaps.
Yeah.
I assume that that is more work, but I could be wrong, than having to sort of manage an existing set of sounds that were taken in potentially like in the environment. Or is that what do you prefer to do in those two situations if you had to choose one, and which one is like harder per se?
Sure. Okay. That's interesting.
Hmm.
So this is going to be a lame answer. It's almost a non-answer where it's like it depends.
Yeah, no, I feel
Um,
that.
so I'll give you an example. So we did one movie, I think right before the pandemic, called BJ's Mobile Gift Shop, and it was this guy who was walking around the streets of Chicago, this Korean American dude, and he had this like a roller bag, like a luggage, like a red like suitcase that you like would drag around the airport with the four wheels, like that, one of those things. And he would sell stuff out of his bag, right? And so, but he always tended to always have something that somebody needed. Like it would be random stuff. Like the opening shot is him selling some guy spilling getting coffee spilled on him before an interview, and he sees BJ sees him. And he's like, I got just what you need. He has like paper towels for him. He's got a new tie. He's got a new shirt for him. Like all the stuff that he sells to this guy. Um, and so that's was shot in Chicago. Some of the shots were just were just unusable audio wise. Visually, they look great, but we had to strip it to silence and then rebuild the entire city of Chicago, like for those shots, which, as you can imagine, is very labor intensive. And then if someone was speaking on top of it, we had to figure out a way to clean up the dialogue enough to make it audible and so you could just understand what they're saying, but then also get the ambience to make sense around it. So that is extremely time intensive. So I would rather have them got that correct and then had us been able to create stuff on top of it, but ended up being okay. In other situations, though, building something from scratch is like super fun and creative, as opposed to that where we had to strip it and build it from scratch. Like video games, for instance, you get to just like pick kind of like a sound design language. Usually that comes from like meetings with like the creative director or whomever is kind of heading that part of the project, usually a director, and kind of centering on whether it's like adjectives, emotion, like whatever words come to mind, whatever the setting is, those various themes, and you kind of use that to guide, how you build the world. Whether that's how the ambient sounds, like is it barren? Is it really alive? Is it like very tonal? Or is it very like natural sounding as opposed to like musical, like in that way? Like all of these different choices. Is the wind like, or is it more like calm and it's not blustering and that kind of stuff? You know, so it truly depends. I will say this though, this is definitive. I don't necessarily like cleaning up dialogue too much. That can get tedious very quickly. So can like adding footsteps to stuff because we do that a lot. So like just scenes where people are walking a lot like suck. In a game, you just kind of have to like craft a bunch of footsteps, but once you do that, you're done.
Reusable.
Like you just connect it to the animation, and every time the thing steps, it'll pick one of those things, and you're fine. And so you're like, okay, you have like one day of like really tedious stuff, and then that's it. Whereas for a movie full of footsteps, a footsteps pass could take forever. Like it sucks. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of all over the place, depending. But in the end, if you did it right, it's really nice. You get kind of a satisfaction out of it when you can just kind of like watch something or play something and it just like works. Like you kind of know that it just works. It just reads well, and it doesn't just make you feel strange. Like, oh, it's kind of like those. You're like, okay, cool. I'm not terrible at my job. Let's go to the next one. And then hopefully the director says, okay, so you don't have to go back and redo it.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, so a lot of these questions I realize are very variable and situational, but just like averages or something that you can give. And I know also they differ between both movie and video game a bit too. So two questions that I have is one, generally speaking, or on the movies that you worked on as a sample size, maybe if that's easier, how much of the movie is like doing sound design for things like where to fill music and the experiential sort of sound versus the sounds of the atmosphere and like things happening? Does that make sense?
This is an interesting question. So this is kind of really interesting because since there's two of us, so it's me and Austin, who and we still have our company Cave Bat doing stuff. I typically will take, no matter what the project is, I'm typically taking like a lot of the building of the ambience, like automatically. Like I think it's because just simply he's a better sound designer than I am, and he can get to a very high quality sound much faster, and then I don't mind as much tedious work and like placing like things in the like how that works. And so I'll spend a long time doing that, or he'll spend a long time doing filling the like the small bits with like very like intentional sounds that you're supposed to hear. Like in this situation, I'm kind of talking about like things that are like if it were like a sword, like a lightsaber type weapon, or like an energy rifle, or like a force field, like something that's like very complex. You know, he's super good at like just honing in on like an idea, running with it, like knowing where to pull from really quickly, and putting together something like very high quality very fast. Whereas like I have no problem like sitting there and like understanding like, okay, where do the things need to fit in here in the background, like to make the world feel great, to make it feel like okay. So it's funny, since we're split up, it feels like I'm doing 100% one and he's doing 100% of the other. If we were the same person, I truly feel like it would be like, you know, it would oscillate like anywhere from 35% to like 65% of one to the other, depending on the project and at the time. Games are way different though. Like that's all movies. So games can be very different because it's not only, you know, it's not linear. Like a movie's linear. You push play, and it's the same every single time.
Right.
Whereas a video game is interactive, very non-linear.
Mm-hmm.
We, and by we, I mean like literally everyone on the project doesn't know what the player is going to do. They can sit in one spot for an hour. They can blaze through a level as fast as possible. They can jump the entire time. They can, you know, they can do whatever they want. And so we have to kind of anticipate that and think, if you're doing it correctly, in my opinion, you're thinking about that at the design part of the process, not just at like the implementation part where you're putting it into the game. You're thinking about that in terms of like, how does this sound if the player is allowed to just mash the button? Because we're gonna do that. Like we're all gonna sit there and click the button a lot to do the thing, like a lot. We're gonna break stuff. We're gonna like, it just happens. Like we love doing that, like either consciously or unconsciously. So that changes that percentage a lot, because you can then get stuck on the design part of a singular sound way more than you would spend on like building, like throwing birds around the level. You know what I'm saying? Like to build up the world. Like that would be simple. But if someone can interact with that part of the game, then maybe it flips. You know what I'm saying? It's really interesting. So like in gaming, it's maybe not as close to the center as it is like skewed heavily one way or like skewed heavily the other way. We have found so far.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that was really interesting. That's an interesting question. I never think about it like that. Just kind of doing what needs to be, what's like required in that moment. Yeah.
No, I get that. I mean, if I turn that around and I try and apply it to like my experiences, right? Like, is there a specific like sway one way or the other in some category for engineering, right? Like maybe an equivalent is like, does a project have more front end or back end, right? If I was to use that as a similar comparison to that idea, I think similarly to you, there is that sense of like, depending on the project, it sways one way or the other because there's different situations or use cases. So I think, you know, I'm interested, or I guess I was interested, and you answered it, about like what you've experienced in terms of how it kind of shifted, but also it really, I think, does just come down to what it is, right? So a movie that is like, what is the one that is like, there's like very minimal talking and it's like all just really loud sound, from like 5-6 years ago? Tenet?
Any Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah.
Tenet did that for sure. You couldn't understand a word they said. But so you could also pick Inception. You could also pick
but
like
yeah,
Oppenheimer, kind of.
Yeah, so given some situations, some more extreme examples, right? There's like areas where it's like heavier in certain areas, and then there's other films where it's like very minimal, like ambiance, or I guess there's a level to it, I suppose. But there's like, it feels very quiet. It feels very barren intentionally,
Yes.
because of the what it's going for. And I
Yes.
think similarly, you apply that when I think about it, to my sort of thing. It's like if I'm working on some project that's really front end focused because of what it's trying to achieve, then there's more work there. Vice versa, that kind of situation. So
That makes sense.
suppose that's kind of how a lot of things work, right?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think I am, or we also myself, both of us, we keeping that in mind. It seems as though we're skewing towards gaming more so than movies. I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
because I think we like when we're kind of like working on any, like in either extreme, like whether it's like the specific sound design moment or whether it's like a whole ambience thing and like backgroundy thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I think we like the fact that it can be so polar like that,
Mm-hmm.
and on top of it, the fact that the reason that it skews one way or the other is normally because you're trying to convey specific information to the player, which selfishly makes us feel good because it feels
Mm-hmm.
like sound has more power
Mm-hmm.
in that medium. Whereas in the movie, like yeah, sound is used to convey information, of course, but again, it's the same every single time. So once it happens the first time, it's just like whatever. But in a game, it can happen like on your first playthrough, it can happen on your second, it can never happen and you don't find it, and then someone goes like, "Did you get that cool little melody when the
Mm-hmm.
thing happened?" You're like, "No," or like you just get excited whenever it does happen because clearly that
Mm-hmm.
means you're doing something right, or something wrong. Uh, so I think that's that's something that we really really appreciate, like about
Yeah.
the
Yeah, I can
job and
see
the
that.
fact that it's so heavily skewed in one direction or another. Whether it's like
Mm-hmm.
the calm after the storm, so you
Mm-hmm.
finally get to hear the ambience, and it's like a calming, like oh god, I did it, like type of
Mm-hmm.
moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or the reverse. That's pretty cool. I'd say. Have you like played anything or heard anything recently that you kind of like latched onto, like where you're like, ooh, I really like that. It could be a score, it could be a sound, or like a moment that dealt with sound in it, or maybe just sound was accompanying it, where you're like, this was cool, like for sure.
Um, is there anything that stuck out to me recently? So I would say that one thing that I enjoyed was around, I played Starfield back when it came out, like
Yep.
for a few
Yep.
weeks or whatever. And I think it kind of ties together with No Man's Sky a bit because similar environments, but sort of the experience of those type of like space games is really interesting. Like the sound in um, one, the sort of futuristic style, like there's a lot of, I think, creativity in sounds that relate to like ships and like the way certain things sound from like inside the ship. What are like random, buttons or different mechanics that don't exist in the real world? Like what does a hyperdrive sound like, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of like creativity in those sounds, but there's also such a extreme change as well because space is just like a dead silent
It's
place.
a vacuum. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't have sound.
So so there's the interesting sort of dynamic of like going when you experience certain things, a lot of times you go from sound into lack of sound or
Yes.
some ambient sound potentially if it's like music to like keep it from being totally silent. But
Hmm.
um yeah, I think that's something that I sort of subconsciously appreciate when I'm going through it. I wouldn't say there's a specific sound that sticks out to me, but I would say that. I will say additionally, Another thing that comes to me, but is more of like, I wouldn't say it's negative, but it's like a little touch of like annoying, I suppose, is so I've been playing Path of Exile, right? And
Okay.
At endgame of that, everything is just like a cluster. Like you are just shooting out like a million skills. There's like a bajillion things on the screen, and every single thing has a sound effect, and they're all playing at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, and it's like very overwhelming. But it's not like a negative, because like when you're at that place, the rest of it's so satisfying. Like you're doing a bunch of damage, or you're going through like clearing a bunch of monsters and stuff. So like
Right.
you're strong and you feel the strength, but at the same time you're basically being bombarded with noise, like with no sort of cohesiveness
Cat like.
that that makes you feel like, oh, this is very like something I would experience in real life. It's sort of just like, holy shit.
Uh-huh. That's a funny. I always wonder with games like that. Like, it's a really interesting thing that you've noticed. Because in my mind, what I immediately think of is and I'm sure they did. Like, did the director and the whoever it was, like those sound designers, like, did they get together and have a meeting about like, because I guarantee somebody was playing it and they were like, "There's a lot of shit happening at once." Like, we got a lot of sound, but like you said, it conveys like progress in a way. Like
Yeah.
you have now been able to get to this point of like, look how much stuff you're doing,
Yeah.
which does have some kind of satisfaction built into it because you're just hearing like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Right.
And so there's something to be said about that. And clearly they went that direction. Because like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will let you know, there is 100% ways, like a couple, like a few, to limit
Yeah.
that those sounds to certain things. Like they could have figured that out. So it feels like a conscious choice, which is interesting.
Yeah, and
Um,
I wonder what their thought process is there, because like when I think about it, right, like the game at the end game in a sense is sort of, there's a ridiculousness to it that I think is like uh embraced, and maybe that's where it kind of fits in. But you
mm-hmm.
think about, I think from a logical standpoint, right? If each of these things have a sound and you sort of scale them to unrealistic levels. So, for example, two examples would be: one, imagine you're shooting a bow and arrow, and then you shoot one arrow, right? Well, at endgame, you can shoot 10 arrows at one time, and you can be as fast as being able to shoot like 6 to 7 times a second or something. And so now you're shooting 60 arrows a second. It's like, okay, so realistically, not a thing, bit ridiculous, but if we keep the sound for every individual arrow, it's just like,
It's just,
right?
like it
Yeah,
just becomes like mush.
right.
Yeah, I feel like if there's a slider for this, like they had to have brought it back. Like if over here is just like let every single sound play, and this is like let only one of each sound play at a time, then like they heard this and went like, this is just it's just literally white noise. It's just like 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 it just breaks. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure it just breaks. And so what I feel like, because it broke with just the sheer amount of inputs,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
the choice to leave it where they did is it's very conscious that they went and then went leave it in utter chaos, just make sure it doesn't break.
Right.
Like
Right.
that's a funny thing to land on. I mean, but it works. It's a very stylish choice,
It
you know.
is. Yeah.
um,
And yeah, and like I said, like it's, I don't hate it. I don't notice it too much, but it is one of those things where if I was to think about the sound specifically, I'm like, this is a little weird, right? Like, or if there's like a million, there's like a bunch of different ways you can do sort of like a chain explosion of monsters, essentially. And so if you have 500 monsters on your screen and they all explode in a chain within, 2 seconds of each other, right? Like, that's just a blast of noise,
Yes.
Right, but there is, if I really think about exactly how it breaks down, there is some level of break in there. So there is a sense of like do type tempo to it that like to your point, if everything played, it would just be literally nonsensical.
Yeah, it would be, if the audio, it would be nuts. Like
Right.
it would probably just cut out. It'd be like it wouldn't know how to play.
Yeah.
Like it'd be the whole thing.
So that is interesting because that's like a new perspective of like, it feels like a lot like maybe they didn't take into account the sound and just let it all play, but there is actually a lot of thought that goes into it when you consider those really extreme cases where it still like has sound working, has a connection to what's happening. So
yes, for sure. And of course there are, like bugs and stuff, because like if you heard something like that in a movie, nothing is put into a movie that's not supposed to be there. Everything is just placed exactly where it should be. In a game, that's what you hope for, but it's a game. Like once you start getting into code, as you know, like stuff just gets wonky sometimes. And the more and more you add, the more chances there are that things like get kind of weird that you can't, that you don't, you're not ready for. So yeah, bugs happen where like you're like, I didn't intend for there to be 1,700 events of that same sound. Like I didn't code it that way, but I guess we'll have to fix that. Like, oh, it's because it does, that kind of stuff. But it's very, very interesting. I love it. It's always a new challenge, and it adds another layer. Gaming specifically, it adds another layer of design to it, because like it just gives you another like tool in your tool belt, which is nice. Because like for instance, if you want to make a really high quality explosion sound with like all these layers in it, you don't necessarily want to always have to rely on making like 11 explosions or more, 100 of them explode, because if it's a game like where it's a shooter and there's like stuff blowing up all the time, then the player is going to get used to hearing 11 specific explosions. Like they're going to eventually pick up on like that one repeated, that one repeat. So then it takes another level of design and like creativity and like thought planning to, in a different program, like outside of how you designed it, like maybe you craft certain layers of it, but then in the other program you have to like be able to randomize those layers in a way that still feels impactful, in a way that still feels fun and like that makes sense. And so you get just in order to get more variation out of the sound that you make, and time is money, as they say, so you can't spend too much time doing one thing. So you got to pull on those levers if you can, which is always an interesting thing to go like, how much of this do we do in like Pro Tools or in Reaper or something and like design the sound there? How much of this are we designing in the middleware like Wise or FMod or something? What how are we actually going to do this? And then how is it being called into the game? Like it's really like a puzzle sometimes, which is another level of satisfaction when you get it right. Like you play the game, you're like, this isn't working. Why is this working? And then you keep iterating on, and then it finally works. You're just like, oh yes, like, and it's literally just like when the player touches the tree, like touches the bush, make the bush go, like in a satisfying way.
Yeah,
and you just spend the next 30 seconds walking through the bush that you figured out how to make noise correctly, and you're like, yes, like awesome, like it's great.
Yeah, I feel that, man. I mean, I think like there's such an overlap to games is such like a really, it feels like such a great way to visualize or connect all the different pieces of how similar and different all these roles are, right? So I haven't specifically worked at a game studio or built a full-fledged game, but I dabble in some game development stuff.
Yeah.
And I think about the different experiences that you're talking about, and I like resonate with a lot of those from the aspect of coding a game or like putting the pieces together, right? Like, and I think similarly experiencing the art or the animation part of it as well, right? Like you talk about that experience of touching the bush and hearing the sound of the bush. I think similarly, if you're an animator and you're creating like the correct walking motion, and you experience like how fluid it looks compared to how janky it can look, like that can feel really, really positive. And then also as like the coder, the developer, right, you're putting these pieces together and seeing like your input from the keyboard create the movement of the character, or you know, your process of like coding up projectiles to correctly maneuver certain ways or go across the screen in certain ways. Like, I think in so many ways, each one of those jobs is like, they're all like equal parts to putting together like a really high quality game. You need like all three like to equal degrees. And then I guess that director at the top that's able to help navigate between the three, that kind of pieces it all together and says like, here's where we can like mold this corner between engineering and animation, and here's where we can mold this corner between like, you know, sound and animation, or engineering and sound, right? Like it's kind of a really interesting, like you said, I mean, there's individual puzzles, but the whole game in itself is a puzzle trying to put all of the different pieces of work together.
Yes, for sure. We've experienced that in like so many ways. Even just communicating what you need to other departments. Like just something as simple as like not understanding how hard or easy it is to like, hey, it looks like there's too many bullets coming out of the gun as it fires. If does that mean it's triggering our sounds more, or is that just a visual thing? So who am I? Who do I need to get to fix this, or is it a me thing, and I just need to like add more bullet, like change the bullet sound, that kind of stuff, and it's really really a super big puzzle. I will say though, I don't know if it's all even. I feel like everyone bows down to programmers, like especially in video games. Like at least I know audio does. Like for us, like because we know the bare minimum to like, if you're like a really good, like if you know, I need to really like bone up on my coding knowledge, but like if you're like a very good sound designer and stuff, you tend to start to dabble more into, you know, whatever you're using, C++, C#, whatever that is, for whatever game engine you're using. So you can actually hook up your own sounds and do that kind of stuff. But like audio programmers, like legit ones, and just like any other people in like technical design, like you're our best friends. Like yeah. So we rely on them so much sometimes to like make things work. Like oh my god. So big props to them, because you know I guess I could have went into like audio programming, but I saw some of it and I was like, that's not for me. Like I want to take this microphone and run around a forest. Like, that sounds more fun to me. Like than that stuff. So you know, yeah, jeez, oh Pete. I find that we're constantly talking to two different, the UI programmer and the like technical designer for like pretty much the whole game. Like we're like the technical director. Like we're like constantly talking to both of them. Like hello, like could you pretty please give us a hook for this idea that we have? That would be so fun. Thank you. You're the best. And then the same on the other way. Like, oh, sorry to bother you, but the tires don't make noise when they hit the ground, and we don't know why. Please help. Like, yeah. So programmers are legit, man. Y'all are awesome. Would you want to do more game dev stuff? I got a job for you. No. But,
no, I'm for sure gonna do some more like over time. It's very much a hobby thing for me. There is like a goal I have in my lifetime that's kind of always been there, to eventually create a full game. So at some point we'll get it done, but I've dabbled in it in a bunch of different avenues and like tried out a bunch of things, and I made like little things that I've like played myself, had some like copy paste from the internet assets that can't be sold, or like poorly drawn things, right? But yeah, at some point for sure that's something that I'm like super interested in.
Join a game jam one time.
I did. I ran the game design club in college. I was president.
You were
So
president of it? That's cool.
I
Ooh,
I threw game jams and stuff.
would you want to like? I mean, this is a completely different career, like path. So maybe not. But like, do you like that role as basically like a director, like a game director role,
I don't even know
or
what it really entails.
or
If
producer? You make all the well, the producer and director are two different things. The director side of it is basically like making all of the decisions for what should go inside of the thing, and just steering the ship, everyone going in the same direction. So you have the vision. You're not necessarily creating assets or um, you know writing code, but like people are like, "Is this good?" Like, and you go,
no,
"Yes." Like,
this is terrible.
no, this is trash. Redo it. Like
Get
that's
back
you.
to work.
Basically, I mean, because you already started your own company, like, so you already have that like mindset of like, I have the
Mm,
vision. This is
mm-hmm.
probably what it should look like. Like, blah blah. Like, would you want to do that at all? Again, clearly different career path because like game director is like a totally specific thing. But
Yeah, I
you
mean,
like it.
talk to me in like 3 to 5 years.
Okay, okay, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
I do.
just
So
be sure to hire me.
yeah,
That's all. Give me
yeah.
a job. It would be great.
I do think it would be really. So I have this aspirational sort of goal, and like, Steven, my current co-founder with Culture Booster, um, both of us want to get to a point with Culture Booster where we either, you know, get it to a place where we can sort of like, connect it into a larger existing system, or even, eventually have it in such a stable place that we can sort of do other things ourselves, right? Or I
Okay.
should speak mainly for myself here because that's me. We do
Right.
both want to get to a stable place, but when it's there, I know that at some point I also want to do other things, and I want some of the freedoms to be able to like, try another thing in my life. One of the options that I would consider is doing something like that. And my goal would be to be financially in a place where I could just do things that I wanted to do and sort of forego any sort of money aspect, whether that means I have to fund it myself, which would be, a huge privilege. You'd have to be in a really good financial spot to be able to do that, or even just like work on a project and like go through that experience and use whatever skills I have from all the other things I did to put towards that, but do a full project and see what that's like, and experience that process. I think there's a lot of things that I want to do that with, so yeah, it's just kind of we'll see where things go.
Sounds like you want to start a game studio. Very hard to do,
I
but
don't know if
like,
I would go that far. That'd be a bit.
yes, you do.
I mean, all of the dominoes would need to fall into place, and I would probably need a sugar daddy, a company sugar daddy that funds the whole studio so that I don't have to do that much.
Isn't that every studio? Essentially, they're just called investors. Like that's all an investor is.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
You butter them
That
up,
is the
maybe
case.
not
Yes.
with certain things more, but they throw you money.
Yeah.
They give you that. They give you that. They give you that.
I mean,
That sugar.
ideally, I think the slight difference is that the type of sugar daddy. There's the sugar daddy that wants nothing from you and just wants you to be happy and give you money, and then there's the sugar daddy that expects something for their money. And
if you really want the company to work, no.
yeah, maybe, yeah. I'll pass on putting together a company for game dev with a sugar daddy that expects a lot from me, considering that's not
To be
even
honest, that's not even a bad like name for the studio. Like sugar daddy.
sugar daddy.
I'd laugh. Like I've been making games. I'd be like, yeah, that's good. Oh my gosh, I'll never forget it. No, that'd be awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
not the studio thing. They're definitely like running a game, that kind of stuff. I'm honestly, dude, you know enough people to make a whole game right now.
It's money. That it
It's very
usually always
like we
comes
all
down to money, right? Yeah. Got to
right,
find a way to pay all those people for their time.
right, because we all don't have time. Because I would of course do it, but like I also have to eat food so I don't die.
Yeah,
That's like
there's those interesting needs that we have as humans, such as food and shelter. They're kind of important.
I live outside for a while.
You are
I
in
don't know how my
California. That is an
I don't know how my
option.
computer would work though. That's part of
Have to go to a lot of Starbucks.
it. But then again, I guess my computer doesn't work right now, so it's fine.
True, you're pretty much in the same
So that's
place.
fine. I don't lose anything there. Jesus. Yeah.
Oh
That's
man.
fine.
Um, so I want to actually shift a little bit because I'm kind of curious. You started to kind of get into some of what it's like to work in some of the inner workings of when you do sound design and stuff. And you mentioned this also a little bit when we talk, so you can kind of go down this avenue as you feel. But um, how have your experiences been in sound design? Like, what sorts of difficulties have you had to navigate? And
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. So sound design is a weird. Well, audio in general is a funny industry or like career path. Really, anything created with audio. So I'm not necessarily talking about like a music teacher, really, and I'm not necessarily talking about musician either. Even though musician is very, very difficult to do like very successfully,
mm,
sure. But what I'm getting at more is like in audio, there's not a lot of like roadmap to it
mm,
in general. So that's
mm-hmm,
that's like the first thing. So for everyone getting into it, it's kind of hard because even if you like it, yes, there are videos that teach you how to do stuff. Yes, there's videos so you can learn. The resources are definitely out there to learn it and to get good. The problem is when it comes to actually making money doing it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's a very kind of like just keep poking at what you can, and then eventually, if you're working hard, people will start to give you money at some point, which is not a satisfying answer for many, many, many people. Like, because in so many other industries, it's like you do that, you go to school, you do a thing, and you have a resume and you do a job, or you get an internship, and then that internship turns into a job. It's like there's a lot of people you could talk to where they go, this is exactly what I did. And if you reproduce these exact steps, you know,
Yeah.
more often than not, you're going to land yourself a job somewhere.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
With this, it's very different. Like some of that, if you're trying to get hired by like a studio, is yeah, you learn it. Somehow you do projects, but many studios are looking for a shipped game already, which is weird because how do you? It's like the age old question with a lot of different.
Yeah.
How do you ship a game without going to a studio that's going to hire you to ship a game? Um, it's that catch-22 type of deal. And then
Mm-hmm,
for
mm-hmm,
us, on top of that, we're not trying to get hired by studios. We're freelancers
mm.
trying to find work, but people still want you to have worked.
Yeah.
so, so we were lucky enough to take the path of we're doing indie movies for like no money because that's how everybody does anything first, pretty much. Like you do stuff for almost free and you keep doing it, and then eventually you build the network of people and they talk to people and you get another project, and those projects start to have bigger budgets. When is that going to happen? You don't know. Like that's very frustrating, like extremely frustrating, especially for me. I kind of like a plan, at least a loose plan.
Mm.
Like if you can be, like something like that that I can hold on to. So like the randomness of it, like drove me wild, is driving me wild. Like it's both. Um, so but we were at least able to parlay that with good networking skills, really mostly from Austin. Like he's super super good at what he does. Um, into like our first game thing.
Mm.
And then once you get the first one, you use that to get the second one, and so on. So now we're working on 2 games simultaneously, which sucks because we're trying to look for another game, but both games haven't come out yet. So we're like, shit, we can't use these to help ourselves with the next one, but that's okay. So that whole experience has been very, very interesting. One, two, audio in general is kind of a gentleman's sport, like low key. Like it's not too easy to acquire a lot of the equipment that you need in order to start doing stuff in audio. It takes time for sure. If you don't just like come from money, or you don't somehow have access to like good enough used equipment, like that kind of thing, which also costs money, of course. Like it's just hard. It's just kind of hard to build up all that stuff. Of course, you can get started by using free sounds. You can get started. You know, all you need is like one of the DAWs, like Reaper or Pro Tools or something, which aren't inexpensive. Well, Reaper is pretty cheap, but there's ways to get started cheap. But if you really want to build yourself up and get, you know, there's just like certain tools that you need. Some of those one tool costs hundreds and hundreds of dollars for that one thing, let alone subscriptions, let alone hardware like microphones, let alone computers themselves, because things are getting more and more technological, like specifically in the box versus like acoustic stuff and natural stuff outside. So like those programs cost a lot of money. Like, and so it's hard to keep when you get the ball rolling to like keep that going if you're not getting that income in, you know. So it's a tough, you know, you gotta really grind it out and really want it in order to like figure out how to keep that going. And then thirdly, for me, my personal experience is like just being black specifically, like that this transcends audio. This goes into any industry ever. It's just harder when you don't necessarily have a, a guiding light for that as well. Not only do we not have it in general, really, as like audio people, but at least there are clearly sound designers and composers who have done it for years. Like we know, like John Williams and Ben Burt, like like names like that who've done Star Wars and all this other stuff. But like for me, when you look for like a role model or like a superhero or some kind of champion like that, someone who looks like me to like follow in their footsteps, it doesn't really exist. Again, monetarily it's tougher, like that kind of stuff, and so there's that, and like it's a very systematic thing for why there probably aren't that many people of color in audio in general. um it's just kind of the, you know, that's just the truth of the matter. And so it's an interesting thing for sure. It's something I think about. I don't think I've been by any means discriminated against for that last one, like at all, for audio in my life, sure. In audio, no. You know, it's a pretty good community, so that's good for sure. But it is something that I do think about because like I don't can't not think about it, like being who I am. Um, but it's been an interesting journey for sure, and I really want, I don't know, like I'm still, I guess, relatively young or early in my career, you know, and so I suppose I would want to somehow demystify the path if possible, because it could just be the nature of the job and the nature of the industry. Like gaming is specifically gaming. It's still kind of wild westy. Like kind of hasn't been around for that long.
Yeah.
Film's been around for much longer, so it's a bit more established in like ways that you can do stuff. So I would say it's a little bit easier to understand some of the routes you can take for success. Not saying that it's easy. It's still like, you know, audio is a pretty cutthroat thing. Like it's a very small knit community, and like once you get somebody who knows, who's like they like who they work with, they stick with them, because why would you deviate? Like this is, it's a creative thing, so you like the way that their brain thinks, you're gonna pull them every time. Makes sense. But for, yeah, video games, like if I could figure out how to like kind of look back, like on if we're using a like a race analogy or something like that, and someone's like early in their journey, whomever they are, like I'm trying to figure out maybe a way to demystify that path a little bit. Like I'm trying to learn as much as I can so that if somebody were to ask me later, like how do you do this? Like because I had that question a million times, and I kind of get like like kind of unsatisfying answers. It's pretty much just I'll just keep going. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
like I never thought I was gonna give up, so that doesn't really help me. Like it does. Like thank you for believing in me. But like so, I guess towards the like the middle to end of my path, that's one thing that I'm like one goal I'm really trying to hit. It's like figure out enough about what's worked and enough about what hasn't worked so that I can be one of the people who can finally just be like, okay, look, like this is what I did. If you do these specific things, unfortunately, I can't tell you. There's not enough research out there. I can't tell you if it's gonna work, but I can tell you that it definitely worked for me, and I think you should do exactly that. Like,
yeah,
that would be nice.
Going back to the first one you talked about, one thing that I connect with a bit, and I'm curious how closely you see this, or if you see the difference that I'm thinking about is if that's sort of a major factor or not, is like you said, audio is a creative activity, job,
Sure.
experience, whatever, just like art. And if you think about an artist and what they have to do to become successful, right? It's very similarly like there isn't a path. There's this idea that you create art and then you provide it somewhere for people to sort of see. And by them liking your work, they want you to maybe do something, liking your style, liking the way you do things. With art, in a lot of ways, it's much easier to provide that directly to people because most often you can see exactly what someone's style is, exactly what their art looks like in a matter of like seconds, right? Even if it's like animation and stuff, you still get a lot of understanding of what their style is. I can imagine that with audio, especially with the way that there is this whole aspect to it in some cases where it's like we don't consciously make as much of a connection to it in our normal life. Like it could be much harder, or it's a longer form. It could be much harder to determine someone's style, to determine what you connect with from their creativity. And so in some ways, is that something that you see also as like a way to get your stuff out there is maybe more difficult than?
That's a really good question. Yeah. Audio just as it is, like the style, what the medium that it is such a support type of, it's supporting type of creative outlet. It's not like music that can be viewed as one could like a portrait or as you would like a statue. Music can be almost viewed like in a museum in a way that like art can, like that what you just outlined. Whereas audio, the only way that really happens is when it's supporting something else.
Right.
For like, unless the only situation I can think of right now where it's not quite like that is if you sell what's called sample packs, like for whatever. If you record your own footsteps and then you like edit them and sell them as a pack, so people can buy it and use it in their stuff. And same with like whatever else, like nature sounds of a factory or whatever. Like, which is a great way to make like extra income, like on the side. But again, when you compare that to other forms of art, the audience that you're selling to is much smaller because you're really only selling to audio people, other audio people who need that stuff to support something else. You're not making it to throw it on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. So like literally the entire world has a chance to like it and sell it. And buy it. Like so it is in fact, it's a bit harder because like not it's just it's very niche in that way. But I love it. I love the fact that it's used to support things. Like I feel like all audio people do, or else why the hell would we be doing this? Like we love the fact that like yes, we get to take pride in not only creating something that we love, like that's part that obviously a massive part of it, but it's that it can then be attached to something and elevated to something else, and then the marriage of those two things or three things or whatever gives an emotional response from someone else, like as it's together. Like that's awesome. Like that whole thing is, that's why we do it. Plus, like, what else would we do? We're not good at anything. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm sure we are. But yeah.
Yeah. On the second point, you said, it's difficult to potentially get into because of the cost of the barrier to entry in terms of financial cost is quite high. Do you see that going in either direction or staying the same as we increase in technology? Because when I think about it, right, there's what comes to mind for me is that there's kind of two things happening as time goes on, and I'm not sure how, when you put them together, what you have experienced it being like. But the two things that are happening is, one, technology gets better, so you don't need to spend as much money to get something that can do a lot. Right. But two, a lot more stuff is moving to digital when it comes to sound, in terms of being able to create and sample stuff and the tools that you can use, or even if you do sort of acoustics and stuff, or you get sounds from the environment, there's still a process into bringing them into the digital world and how you navigate that. Do you feel that one is moving at a faster pace than the other to a point where it makes it harder or easier in the future to get into audio?
This is an interesting topic. I think that, yes, things are going to get cheaper to just purchase the different programs, that kind of stuff. Now, that's not everything, though. This is an interesting situation. So a lot of the programs that we need or that we use are run by like pretty big corporations who are greedy and evil. So their prices coming down for stuff is like, I'm not sure. Now, the physical things like microphones, interfaces, like that kind of stuff, monitors, like speakers, like that, those things, yeah, like those are going to get cheaper. You can get that. Like it's going to be easier to get in on it, that kind of stuff. But like, yeah, all the digital stuff, all the software, I'm not sure I see that coming down too much. Not really. I some of it, but what they really do is they just upgrade the software and then sell it at the same price. And so like you're not gonna like, and then eventually technology gets to the point where you have to upgrade. Like you can't even use the old version of the thing until you upgrade to something new. So like it almost negates that, like in a weird way.
I'm curious.
Audio specifically. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like in a lot of, and maybe it's making its way now. It's still pretty, I guess, new to the larger scope of the world. But something that's huge in technology that's been growing over many years now is open source stuff, and so community built tools are becoming more and more prevalent, are more and more adopted, especially within the engineering communities. Like even game development, for example, there's open source game development like engines that you can use. Like you can use Unreal and Unity and Godot and things like that, right? Without paying. And then they also have Unreal and Unity have like paid tiers and stuff. But like Godot, for example, is like an open source project, right? So you talk about these things where more and more they are expanding out to that space, and based on what you've said so far, I don't know what, I guess the open source versions of audio software are not able to compete at this point, but I wonder if as things expand, if they will eventually catch up because at some point it's kind of a combination of companies becoming more complacent about having so much market share and people, you know, also kind of getting as far as you can with the tool at the time. Like, it's a little bit of both, where they get like kind of to their end of the product and they also get a bit complacent to not innovate. And then people can catch up with their community built apps, and then it sort of becomes competitive again. So I wonder if that happens in the future too, to help kind of compete against those softwares or bring down those prices.
It'll be tough,
But yeah,
I think it'll be tough because in order to use these different softwares, they have to be compatible with the DAWs that we use. Like, if you're designing in Pro Tools or Logic or something, like, you need files that, like, the formats fit what can be run on that software. And so these people who are making these plugins, like, even if it is open source and it's great and it works, if you can't pull it up inside of Pro Tools because it's not, an AAX format or whatever it needs to be, then, like, you're fucked. Like, you can't. There's no way you can edit your sound to do what you needed to do unless, like, you could, like, bounce the sound out, bring it into the thing, like, if it's like a standalone thing, process it however you want there, and then bring it back. But then, like, workflow is definitely an issue, especially when you get to the AAA level. Like, you don't always have time to be stopping when you're making like 100 assets of the same thing, like a similar thing. Like, I simply don't have enough time to export all of that just to use one thing to export it back. Like, maybe I did something wrong and it doesn't sound exactly how I want it to, so I need to do it again. Like, that's just like, it's not worth it at that level. And so if it's not worth it at that level, where you know where a lot of people start using it, like influential people start using it, it wouldn't get enough traction for, like, Avid, who owns Pro Tools, for Apple, who owns Logic Pro. Like, it wouldn't make sense for them to be like, okay, like, we're gonna work with you so that you can put your plugin on our software, like on our systems, because they're like, why spend the resources and man hours, like, figuring this out with you, and like you're nothing. Like, so let's just, like, good job, but, like, no, like that kind of thing. So I don't really know the way that goes. And it's kind of funny. Like, I was gonna say, it always depends on the consumer and what they want and what their level of quality, like, is up to, like, which brings up, like, AI in my mind, like, what that's gonna do to the audio industry. Because, like, we're hearing, the other day, or not the other, it was like months ago, but the other day, like, I heard it was a TED talk, and I heard a piano solo that was just, like, completely done with AI. Now, I felt like I immediately heard that it was a fucking AI doing the solo. Like, it just didn't feel like a human. But the thought in my mind was, do people care? Like, I don't know if that matters. Like, I'm like, that I know that it's different. I'm like, do people care that it's different? Is it good enough? Is this what they're going to come to expect? Like, is this now the lowest common denominator? If people answer that question, yes, it is good enough, then, like, I'm more worried about that kind of stuff replacing me. Like, me having to compete with that kind of thing. Like, okay, because that's going to be way more efficient, saving money, blah, blah, blah. Like, if people are, wanting that kind of thing, especially if, like, they lower the bar, they go like, okay, indie games that we play, are this is the bar. It's now down to here. Um, AAA games, no, we still want that, like, human crafted personal touch. Like, we demand excellence from it in that way because it feels too cheap. But, like, that lowers the job pool. Like, so, like, it gets so much more competitive in that situation, because all of a sudden all these indie companies are going to be like, well, we can save so much money if we don't need to hire an audio guy or two to do this game. Like, we'll just throw it in the, chat GPT, and we'll crank out like a bunch of audio files somehow, like, whatever the technology is at that point, like, because we know people will buy it, like, for this level of thing. That's kind of scary in a way.
Yeah, I kind of think, one, in most situations, it'll be a tool to help versus a tool to replace any sort of AI thing. to help you be more efficient rather than replace your actual role in a lot of cases. A lot of times it requires a knowledge to be able to correctly format what you need to have it do what you need. So I don't think I think there's like a scary aspect to it for a lot of people that either isn't coming for a really long time or isn't going to come in the way that you maybe expect it to. But what I think to your idea about the way that indie games, I almost see it like working the opposite way. The way the AAA industry kind of feels at the moment in terms of the way games are made, I almost would see them being the ones that are going to cut costs to create the AI sound because it's good enough for 90% of users to not hear it or not notice the bits that are like, a little bit off. Just from how profit motivated the corporation aspect of it is. Whereas indie games are generally made with a lot of like personality to them. But what I do think will be interesting is I think what we'll see a mix of indie games. So there'll be like sound designers will come in to make a game and they'll do this handcrafted sound and have AI help write the code or do the art or something. Or artists might come in and build this game and have AI help do the sound in one case, right? So like I think we'll see more instances where as the tools get better, it'll be individuals that are creating games with their expertise and then using tools to fill the areas where they're weakest. And yeah, there'll probably be some like consolidating or reducing of the job pool to some degree, but again, I do think that there will be a certain skill requirement to be able to eliminate that job, and so you effectively have a different job in place of that, which more or less will end up being the position of like having to know sound design well enough to write the correct things that generate the correct types of outputs that give the right experience for the game. Because I think there'll be a lot of like one thing I've noticed, I guess what I'll say, and we're quite a bit over, so I'll finish this thought and then we can kind of wrap it. Yeah, no, it's all good. One thing I think I've noticed in engineering pretty often, and I think this really overflows to a lot of other things that we in our life just like, and I think it actually ties exactly into what we talked about earlier about how just if you're doing good sound in a movie, it's almost like you don't even notice it, right? And so there's like this aspect of like it's taken for granted, it's taken as granted that this thing will be here and it'll be this certain way, right? And so my experience in engineering is that when you talk to people who are non-engineers, there are times where they will say something like, can the computer do this thing, or are we able to do this? And it is kind of crazy how sometimes their expectation of something that's really difficult for a computer to do is super easy, and the exact opposite. Something that they take as like being super simple is actually super complex for the computer to do, right? And I think that's going to shine in a lot of these areas where people try and replace the human aspect with something that's sort of intelligent, and it'll start to, the cracks will be shown, and it'll be like, oh, we get this output, we get this efficiency, and then all of a sudden things are going to be like falling apart in certain areas, or like not clear, or like missing the mark, or not connected in the way that you would expect, because you can't communicate with this tool the same way you can communicate with a person. There isn't a thought process that goes into them interpreting something and then creating something from that the same way. That doesn't happen the same way with like an AI. And yes, things will get better over time, but I really think it'll be a long time before you're able to replicate a full job in that way, right? So that's why I see it a lot of ways being just an expediter of your current work, just ways to help facilitate tedious tasks, facilitate things where you know exactly what you need to do, but it's just taking you time to do it rather than it just being done instantly by like an AI that you can tell to do this, and this, right? So anyway, That's my thing.
That's a really good take on that. I don't we have time to go in for me to go into that, but yeah, yes, I have a lot of thoughts about this. I like what you're saying. I think I would love if I could have something that would cut out the tedious parts of my work. But it's kind of interesting. I'll just say like the tedious parts of the work are usually tedious, at least in the sound design part, because you're crafting very small things. And if I had to, the fear is that I would then rely on something to do a move that I wouldn't necessarily do. 'Cause, like if I'm fading 20 different footstep sounds, and I'm like, cool, the AI knows how to fade the sounds. like maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
I mean, you always got to
maybe
review,
it'll
right?
learn. Yeah, you got to review it. Maybe
Yeah.
it does, maybe it doesn't. If I review it, then I'm gonna go do it anyways. It's kind of like, why are you here? Like, what are you even doing? But of course, you iterate on it, and it gets better and learns and stuff.
Yeah.
But this is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So, couple of things. There's some chat stuff we can get into, and also we can talk a bit after I close out the video portion of it, right? So, let me do a quick wrap up outro piece, and then we can continue on the discussion and do some like chat related conversational stuff. Cool.
Sounds good.
So we're gonna continue talking, but thank you for taking the time today to talk with me. It was fun. I think the sound design stuff is super interesting, and like I truly did not appreciate it in the same way that I do today until we lived together and I saw like the things that you did and heard about how you talk about sound. Like there's a different perspective that I have about the way things work. And so I really appreciate that sort of experience that I've gotten since I've gotten to know you. So, so just thank you for all of that. And thank you for talking about it today. It's been a good time.
Of course, man. Thank you for saying that. That's like, that means a lot. 'Cause we definitely work hard. And so anytime anybody notices anything, it's like, you see my dumb smile. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome, man. Thanks. I'm really flattered by that. Thank you, man. This is great. I love talking to you.
Yeah, you too. And so to point out again too, before we do shout outs and stuff, a reminder that tonight's video, our charity that we're looking to support is the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. The Twitch command !PCRF will give you a link if you want to donate, and then also in the YouTube video description there'll be a link there. Additionally, we want to shout out Khory's stuff. Khory, you have your business if you want to talk about that really fast.
Yeah, really quick, KBAT Post Audio, or KBAT Post. That's our website. It's going to be getting revamped pretty soon here, so it's going to look completely different. But that's the business. We just got an Instagram because we're super with the times, but there's nothing on it. So don't try and follow us. No, I'm kidding. It's KBAT Audio on Instagram, and which I'll share with you so you can put it up wherever, Josh.
Yeah, I'll drop in the YouTube video description. The shout outs will be there, but also also it'll be in the chat.
Happy holidays.
Yeah.
Well, for only if you see this in the next couple days. If you're watching this after the next couple days from today, no happy holidays to you. Happy holidays are
over. Have terrible holidays if it's a few
terrible. I hope they were bad.
Yeah.
So
you should have been watching this earlier.
That's what I think. Sure.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And then to wrap it out, of course, if you could, we'd appreciate a follow on Twitch or like and subscribe on the video on YouTube. Got to do that social stuff, man. That's how it works.
Yeah. I'm not good at it. You got to teach me.
I'm not good at it either. We're all bad at it.
What'd you call it? Social. What was the word? the term you taught me, social brain.
Content brain?
Content brain. Yeah, yes. You don't even know words.
Content brain. Well, content brain you gotta be careful with because content brain can lead to some pretty crazy stuff, you know.
It's okay. I need more crazy in my life. I feel like I'm boring.
Yeah. Content brain type stuff is like, you know, get yourself hurt, get arrested type of stuff sometimes.
Oh, I don't need to do that.
Sometimes it's a bit far. Or like maybe like accidentally do something that causes you to lose friends. Like that's another one. So maybe we want to take a step back from content brain and maybe just go with like intelligent at social stuff.
We'll workshop the title. But
yes.
I like
we gotta find something catchy. We gotta find something catchy.
Intelligent with social stuff. The ISS. That's not. All of it sounds bad.
Yeah, no. Okay, we're just gonna move on now. Okay, thanks for watching. See ya.
Bye.